All right, let's jump back in time. We're going exactly 50 years ago today to a single month that was packed with political drama, some incredible historic firsts, and a pop culture soundtrack that you just couldn't escape. Let's take a look at February 1976 in Australia and New Zealand.
You know the look, right? It was a time of major transition, kind of caught between the old ways of doing things and this loud, chaotic new era. And while those flared trousers and grainy TV screens define the style, under the surface, some really deep social and political currents were shifting.
So we'll kick things off in Australia. The country was still trying to find its feet after the dismissal, which was, no exaggeration, one of the biggest political crises in its history. And for the former Prime Minister, Gough Whitlam, a whole new controversy was just getting started.
Now this Iraqi money scandal, what a story. The claim was that Whitlam's party, right after being dramatically kicked out of office, was trying to get foreign money to fund their next campaign. Whether it was true or not, it was a total public relations nightmare that dominated the headlines for weeks.
But, it wasn't all just political backstabbing. In the middle of all that chaos, some amazing history was being made. On February 6th, Patricia O'Shane became the country's very first Aboriginal barrister, a massive, massive milestone. Just 3 days later, the entire military structure was reformed into what we now know as the Australian Defence Force. And then, nature threw a huge curveball.
The iconic Gone passenger train, right out in the red center, got trapped by these catastrophic floods. I mean, it was a really desperate situation that went on for 4 days. The story ended with Royal Australian Air Force helicopters winching 76 people, one by one, to safety. The entire country was glued to that dramatic rescue.
But while Australia was wrapped up in a political funding scandal, the tension across the Tasman Sea, in New Zealand, was of a much, much heavier kind. It wasn't about PR crises. It was about a government policy that was causing deep, real trauma within communities. Yeah, over in New Zealand, the mood was incredibly somber. February 1976 saw the government ramp up what were known as the Dawn Raids, a policy that would end up leaving a very long and painful scar on the nation. The reality of this was just stark. You had government-sanctioned police forces raiding the homes of Pacifica families in the dark, early hours of the morning, banging on doors, demanding to see permits, and hunting for so-called overstayers. It was a terrifying practice that specifically targeted one community, and it, understandably, ignited a powerful resistance movement.
And this sentiment really captures the hearts of that resistance. Groups like the Polynesian Panthers organized themselves to educate and protect their communities. Their argument was simple. They were being made scapegoats for economic problems that they had absolutely nothing to do with. Their activism was a direct challenge to this state-led discrimination.
And in other ways, New Zealand was also seeing the end of an era. In Parliament, you had Prime Minister Rob Muldoon, known for his confrontational style, launching this vicious personal attack on an opponent, which sparked the infamous Moyle affair. And at the same time, out on the water, the Rangatira ferry made its final trip, bringing an 80-year tradition of inter-island travel to a close.
Okay, so with all of this political fighting, the natural disasters, the social trauma, there's one shared escape, and that was pop culture. It was this huge unifying force that gave everyone a much-needed and incredibly catchy distraction on both sides of the Tasman.
And the soundtrack to the month was pretty much dominated by one group, ABBA. Seriously, in February 1976, you could not get away from them. Radios from Sydney to Auckland were just constantly playing Mamma Mia and Fernando as the two singles battled it out for that #1 spot in both countries.
But while ABBA was ruling the airwaves, New Zealand had its own, very unique chart topper. The song was Gumboots by Fred Dagg, who was the brilliant comedy persona of John Clark, and it was a legitimate #1 hit. This ode to farm boots just perfectly captured that classic Kiwi sense of humor.
So, let's pull all these different threads together. What does it all mean? Why does this 1 month from 50 years ago still feel so important? Well, because it's a perfect snapshot of a moment of huge, profound change. Whether you were watching the Winter Olympics on a brand new, grainy-colored TV, arguing about politics, or just humming along to ABBA, this month really captured a world in flux. The old ways were ending, and a new, more complicated, and definitely louder era was just roaring to life.
It was a month of political scandal, but also incredible social progress, a month of community trauma and pop music relief.
When you look back at all the divisions, the milestones, and the cultural touchstones of that one chaotic month, it really makes you wonder, what echoes of February 1976 can we still hear in our world today?